On today's podcast, we are going to talk about doing hard things and how doing the hard thing the first time makes doing that exact same thing the second time a lot easier. The reason this came up as a topic is because I was at a networking event recently where we talked about the actual brain science but behind doing hard things and how, for example, if you take a cold shower one time, taking a cold shower the day after actually gets easier. It doesn't get a lot easier. It is still very hard. However, as you continue to make those decisions, they get a lot easier. And so this not only relates to life, but relates to business because there are a lot of things in business in which it's challenging. There are hard decisions to make. And if you can make those hard decisions and push through the first time, making those hard decisions the second time is easier. I have a specific situation, but while I talk, Josh, if you have anything afterwards, you can share any situations you've been in. So I recently was trying to make a decision on my business and whether I should continue with what I was doing or take an opportunity elsewhere. And it was a hard decision because I enjoy what I'm doing with my business. However, this was a good opportunity. Then a third opportunity came up, and it was hard to go back to the first company and say, hey, I'm going to go take this opportunity. I was genuinely nervous about what they would say. I was like, is this going to ruin that relationship? Am I going to burn a bridge? But then I just had to go do it. I just had to schedule the meeting and talk to them and be straight up. And it actually ended up being a lot better than I could have ever imagined. I was able to take the second opportunity with the company, which is basically like a salary while still allowing me to work on my business full time. And then I'm able to do contractor work with the first company because I was willing to push through my nervousness of like, this is going to be a hard meeting to have, telling them, hey, I'm not going to work full time with you. But because I chose to do it, then recently, like, other hard things have come up in my business, but I keep looking back at that, knowing that I pushed through, knowing that I had that meeting, knowing that it ended up being okay. And I was kind of telling myself stuff that wasn't actually going to happen. And I did the hard thing. And now decisions that I have to make currently in my business are getting easier because I was willing to do the hard thing then. So yeah, that was something I experienced really recently. And so it was cool that this whole brain science came up in the networking meeting this last week because it definitely impacted me when I was making that decision earlier.
In your mind, what is the thing that makes some decisions difficult? Like, what is the downside that we're so afraid of in a hard decision?
I would say there's a couple things. One is loss. So for example, when I was going to tell that company, hey, I'm not going to work with you, I was afraid that I was either going to lose. I mean, the owner is a really solid guy. I was afraid I was either going to lose the friendship or lose the professional relationship. He's also connected with a lot of people. And so I felt like, man, I might lose that network of people. Another thing is time. If it takes a long time to do something. So if there's a task that takes a long time, I guess that also goes with loss. Like there's an opportunity cost of doing this task versus another task, but time definitely it definitely makes it a lot harder. And then another one is embarrassment. If you're doing something and you feel like if you're going to fail, you might be embarrassed in front of whoever it is that you obviously don't want to be embarrassed in front of, that can be another thing that might turn us off to certain tasks because no one wants to be embarrassed. But it's when you push through that and realize that no one really cares that much, that's when you are able to make those decisions easier.
So if it's fear of loss, then yeah, fear of embarrassment. So then what is it that makes it, like, it's clearly in the back of your mind, there's something that you feel that you'd need to do, but there's a fear of loss there. So how do you detect whether the upside is good enough that you just need to do it. Like it's worth the risk of embarrassment or financial loss or time loss or whatever. Like what are your tips and for deciding, oh yeah, I just got to go do this thing instead of maybe this is a bad idea.
Yeah, some people are not good at figuring that out, and that's why some people make bad decisions. But like, if anyone were to steal something and then go to jail, that's you're losing a lot of your life. No, I would say there's the easy decisions, which is I'm losing something small, and then there are the decisions where you have to, figure out whether the loss is worth the risk. And I think for me, I just ask AI to do it all for me. No, I would say for me, the way I make that decision is in this case, specifically with my business, because that's the season of life I'm in. But will this, what do I think this will do to my business? Will it push it forward? And then what do I lose by making this decision? And then I kind of have to give a value to both of those. It's not, like a specific, this is worth $10,000. This is worth $8,900. But in my mind, do I think that this is long term going to be a lot more valuable than this? And in the scenario in which I was deciding between giving up my business and working full time with the company, there was one specific hang up that was like equity, because obviously I'm building my business as an asset. But anyways, the point is I was thinking to myself, it's more valuable to me. Don't have a specific number, but it's potentially more valuable to me to have my business long term than to make a salary right now. Thankfully, that third opportunity came up where I could have both, which was really cool. But I had to give it a value, even if it was vague in my mind, whether I thought something one was more valuable than the other. The second way you could do it is literally, I mean, it's never been easier to talk to AI. Genuinely, like I do that all the time. If I have two things to decide from, I do talk to AI about it. And then I take what AI says, I go back in my own mind and think, does this sound reasonable? I don't just make every decision based on AI no matter what, because that's not a good way to think about it. But once you make, I think this also goes into why it's easier to make hard decisions when you've made hard decisions previously, because the more decisions you make, the easier it is to give value to certain things. So if I've made a decision previously, like it just gets easier to be able to decide what's more valuable because you've had experience doing that, and it makes those hard decisions a lot easier. So does AI.
So what was the takeaway on the brain chemistry of once you make one, it's easier to make one again?
It was that your brain literally grows every time you make a hard decision, which then allows yourself to make that decision again later and again later. And when you choose to not make the hard decision, it gets much harder to make that decision later. So if I'm working out one day, working out the next day is easier. But if I've gone a whole week without working out that next day is super hard. And I mean, we've all experienced it. Eating that next Dorito is really easy, whereas doing that workout is a lot harder. But once you've done it, once you've built the habit, then it gets easier.
Yeah, any change in momentum is difficult.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any experiences in where you work or life that where you've had to make a hard decision and then that hard decision made a follow-up decision easier, or the other way around where you are lazy?
Well, I had plenty of examples of being lazy. I love being lazy. No, this just, it, I always go back to like relationship wise, like having a hard conversation is usually always better, almost always better than not. I mean, there are some things that like once they're out there, once the genie's out of the bottle, they can't be put back. Uh, I am pretty much always for the like, if you're interested in somebody and you're really interested in somebody, you should just go tell them. Like, let's just get this ball rolling, because you're either going to get a no, in which case you can move on with life and instead of wasting your time, or you're going to get a, oh, I'm mildly interested in you too. And then you can start figuring out if you like each other or whatever. Well, you should probably already know if you like each other. But the point being, like, yeah, that's one of those things that you do have to navigate a little cautiously, because once it's out in the open, it does change the nature of social interactions afterwards. But it can seem like a hard decision. Payoff is pretty good. Downside, kind of limited, depending on the situation. But sometimes I think thinking through, okay, what's the actual downside scenario here? What's the worst case scenario that's practically going to happen? Not, oh, am I going to do this thing and then Rube Goldberg's going to happen and a brick's going to fall on my head and I die. Like, that's a pretty low probability event. But, and just in general, having difficult conversations like, man, every time you say that thing or do this reaction, I feel like, and usually those are very difficult, but that's also the kind of thing that, like, if it's your significant other or a good friend and every time they do something or say something, it annoys you, if you don't say anything over the course of like 15 years or 10 years, that's when you start really, what do I mean? Like having contempt for people. Like, there's a pretty good book. I wouldn't say it's groundbreaking, but it kind of goes over this. It's called Crucial Conversations. Can't remember the authors, but it sort of talks about, like, yeah, no, if you make a difficult decision, especially in relationships, it usually helps the relationship get better, even if it's in a way that it may not be a significant other, but being more honest in a relationship tends to bind people together. That
Yeah.
being said, you can be too honest and kill things. So there is real risk sometimes. But
Yeah.
when you started talking about that, that's what I think of a lot, because I've just been lots of scenarios in which people admit they haven't said something or asking them questions and they say how they feel. And I'm like, well, have you communicated this to so-and-so? It's frustrating.
Yeah.
I know a therapist, and I often think, like, how do you do your job? It's so hard not to be like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. People, we're all weird. I mean, we all have our quirks. One thing I think about a lot in business, which, by the way, I think I I'm not sure if I mentioned this already. I know I mentioned this before we started, but I'm doing a 30-day challenge of doing hard things. And day one was 1 minute cold shower at the end of whatever shower, which cold showers again are horrible. And yesterday, well, there's like a couple things, but the main one was cold shower. Yesterday was 10-minute walk in silence, and you have to send like an email or a text that you've been not sending because it's hard. So I had to send one that, I mean, it's really in all honesty, it wasn't that hard. I just needed to send it. Like, why not? And then let's see. I actually have the paper here. So tomorrow's going to be 2 minutes cold shower. That's great. And then some other ones are, workout for 45 minutes, 20 minutes of silence. That's actually what's crazy is that silence is one of the hardest things right now because we're so used to inputs. I know we've talked about that quite a lot on here, but it's, yeah. So I'm just doing a whole 30-day challenge, trying to do hard things to make hard things easier. But yeah, one thing I think about in business is firing people, which I've never had to fire people myself. And I know is hard. Like it just is. But I feel like when businesses, in a way that's necessary, like if someone, it's necessary for them to be fired, not just like randomly laying off tons of people because they don't like them anymore. But most of the time when you fire, it's probably a hard decision. But then when you do it, it makes the business better because that person might have been slowing down the team. That person might have been like a negative influence on the team. They probably needed to be gone, and it will it will give your team flexibility. It will allow them to move faster, and it will move your business forward. But I guess for anyone who is watching that needs to fire someone, just do it. It's if they've been dragging your team down, the longer you wait, the longer they'll continue to drag your team down. So, and I know when I was working with you, Josh, there were a couple of times where some people had to be fired because they were dragging the team down, and it made even though they were great people, it made the team faster and better when they weren't there. So it's tough, but it's necessary.
I have thankfully avoided any responsibility of firing anybody. Yeah. I like to be liked, and that is not a scenario in which I want to put myself.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, the people who succeed in business are, well, who like succeed and build tons of wealth in business are rare because there are so many challenges in business that it takes someone who's willing to do hard things, willing to keep pushing even when they continue to fail. So that's what I'm trying to do, is be the person who doesn't give up, even though there are times in which I fail in certain things in certain areas. So yeah, hopefully doing the hard thing pays off. I know at least for health wise, working out, eating right is the hard thing in the moment, but long term, I'm going to be a lot better for it. And even investing, not buying. What's crazy is after that discussion, I actually had another discussion in another group that I'm in a different setting, but we also talked about how doing the hard thing now makes it a lot easier later. And that's when I think of investing, in terms of not buying the brand new iPhone right now, and instead maybe buying a used iPhone, buying a used car, not necessarily buying a totally new car, putting some of that money into investments, into savings. You're going to be a lot better for it later in life, and you won't have to worry so much about money. But our culture is so built on, get what you want right now, buy it right now. You don't need to worry about the future. And that is setting ourselves up for failure. So it's important that we make more hard decisions and not just get all the entertainment we want at this very moment.
Sounds good.
You got anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well, I mean, I just want to say, if you're watching this and if you've been putting off something hard, just do it today. Do it today. Do it tomorrow. Don't wait till next week. That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm doing a 30-day challenge, and I'm going to force Josh to as well. That is the pod for today. If you thought it was a good episode, give us a 5-star review on Spotify. Hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. And send us an email at jc.unscripted@gmail.com. That is the podcast, and we will talk to you on the next one.